The Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations will come to order, and without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the committee at any time. I do want to take a moment, point of personal privilege, and then offer that up to my colleague, Mr. Green, as well. But I want to acknowledge somebody who has been an integral part of our team here at the Oversight Subcommittee, and it's Rachel Caldall. Rachel is our Chief Oversight Counsel for the past 16 months. She previously had been with the Ways and Means Committee. She's going to some other place a little north of us. I hear it's on a campus, some other building over there where they might do some important stuff too, called the Senate. And she is going to be going over to the Senate Banking Committee. And we deeply appreciate your service, Rachel. You've been a pleasure to work with. You've been an amazing professional, and how you have worked through some tough issues. And we just want to say thank you on behalf of myself personally, Sean, my team, and the entire committee. We just want to say thank you for your service. And we know you're not going far. Well, I'm sure our paths will be crossing again. So blessings and all the best to your future. And with that, I'm happy to acknowledge my colleague as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is one of those moments of bipartisanship. I'm honored to acknowledge the outstanding work and would wish her well as well. So thank you, Rachel, for your service.
And as a former staffer, I know you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. And she's been excellent. So thank you again. With that, this hearing is entitled Moving the Money, Part 2, Getting Answers from the Biden Administration on the Iranian Regime's Support of Terrorism. And without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit extraneous materials to the chair for inclusion in the record. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to give an opening statement. So Assistant Secretary Rosenberg, Deputy Special Envoy Paley, thank you for appearing before our subcommittee this morning. Your testimony is significant to this subcommittee and continues to investigate how the Iranian regime accesses money around the world due to relaxed sanction enforcement and waivers. So additionally, we hope that you can shed light on why a new waiver was necessary for the Iraqi electricity sales and how the Biden administration monitors compliance of sanctions around the world. And as I said during our last hearing, I don't believe this topic should be partisan. However, I do believe in accountability. It is vital that our oversight work is informed with the collaboration and testimony directly from agencies in an open and transparent setting, not behind closed doors. So again, thank you for your willingness to be here today. As we documented in our previous hearing, Iran continues to be a leading state sponsor of terrorism, facilitating wide range of attacks and other illicit activities around the globe, and we are seeing these reports daily regarding our own troops in the region. October's attack on our ally Israel is a stark reminder that in order to prevent further atrocities, we must increase, not relax, pressure on the Iranian regime. Iran sanctions have been a significant component of U.S. policy since Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution, and history tells us that they work. For example, the previous administration's maximum pressure campaign cut oil exports from Iran, significantly reducing Tehran's ability to fund attacks against Americans and our allies. In contrast, the current administration has adopted a different strategy. This past September, as part of a deal with the Iranian regime to get American hostages, President Biden waived U.S. sanctions to allow for the transfer of $6 billion of Iranian funds from accounts in South Korea to Qatar. While the funds were only to be used for humanitarian purposes, such as food and medicine, there are reports that the Iranian regime has found and exploited ways around those restrictions. Regardless of what the restrictions are placed on these transferred funds, Iranian officials themselves have signaled that this money is fungible, which is confirmed by the Iranian's president, Ibrahim Raisi, who stated, quote, "This money belongs to the Iranian people, the Iranian government. So the Islamic Republic of Iran will decide what to do with this money," close quote. Believing that the money will go to benefit Iranian citizens may be a bit naive. The White House and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle may attempt to dismiss the significance of these waivers, assuring us that Iran will not gain access to these transferred funds. The reality is they likely will at some point if they haven't already. My colleagues will use this opportunity to point fingers at the past administration instead of acknowledging that under this president, Iran has gained ground and grown in their influence. I will note that the Obama administration, the Trump administration, all had been operating under this, but we saw a decrease in those sales, and that's what this whole program was about, to wean places like Korea off of Iranian oil. The American people expect their representatives in Washington to stand up to those who wish us harm. As we speak, Iranian proxies continue to attack American troops and our allies with little, if any, accountability or responsibility from this administration, in my opinion. So as chair of this subcommittee, I intend to use Congress's oversight and authority to hold our government and the Biden administration accountable. The status quo is not acceptable. American lives have been lost. There's been 66 troops and contractors that have been killed in recent days. And I look forward to having an open and honest dialogue this morning. And with that, I'm going to yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you.
And the chair now recognizes the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Oversight, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for his requested 4 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate greatly your desire for accountability. I respect greatly your desire to investigate fungibility. I do believe that President Biden is an honorable man. I believe that President Biden has followed the law. I believe that what he has done for humanitarian purposes is something that other presidents have done in a similar way. I believe that the $6 billion have not gone to, and I think we'll get evidence of that, to Iran. The money would never go to Iran. It would be utilized to make purchases for humanitarian purposes that could benefit people in Iran. I think that this quest for accountability is something that we should pursue. I don't think we should stop with just the second hearing, however. I think we need a third hearing. I think we need a third hearing because we need to take a look at the money that has gone to Hamas. The CNN news story. In 2018, Qatar, now Qatar is the same country that would aid and assist with the humanitarian support to the people in Iran. In 2018, Qatar began making monthly payments to the Gaza Strip. Some 15 million was sent into Gaza in cash-filled suitcases. Cash-filled suitcases. Now, this is cash money going into the Gaza Strip, into the hands of Hamas. This was delivered by the Qataris through Israeli territory after months of negotiation with Israel. Now, what is interesting about this is, in doing this, $15 million, and by the way, when I say dollars, I literally mean dollars, US dollars, not Canadian dollars. In doing this, the US was aware of the Qatari payments, and this was on President Trump's watch, to Hamas. This is per a former senior State Department official. And also, this allowed Prime Minister Netanyahu to avoid the pressure of peace talks because he could indirectly keep Hamas in power. And in so doing, he would have the perfect enemy, the perfect scapegoat, somebody that does not want Israel to exist. And as a result of not wanting Israel to exist, he could always say, I don't have a partner to negotiate with. But while he's saying this, he is allowing millions in cash. We don't have to talk about fungibility. Millions in cash to go directly to Hamas. I think that we ought to investigate Mr. Trump's actions or the administration's action. I don't think we can limit these things to the lawful actions of President Biden. This is more than probable cause to investigate. I would hope, Mr. Chairman, that we would treat the Trump administration with a similar desire to have accountability and find out what happened to that cash, suitcases of cash. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and I will note that I believe Ms. Rosenberg, and I'm not sure about Mr. Paley, but are career employees, correct? No, I had it reversed. Okay, Mr. Paley is, so you may have that ability to ask them that. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. Waters, for a minute for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. Under the Biden administration, the United States has maintained the most extensive set of comprehensive sanctions on Iran. In fact, the Biden administration has ramped up pressure significantly since the Trump administration by designing sanctions for hundreds of additional entities for activity related to Iran, including illicit sale of Iranian oil. Further, President Biden successfully negotiated a temporary ceasefire and the return of hostages taken by Hamas. This is the kind of steady leadership that America needs in an increasingly unsteady world. While I'm interested in working across the aisle with the administration to ratchet up pressure against Iran in any way possible, the accusations that the Biden administration has somehow weakened sanctions against Iran are simply false and are not conducive to productive conversation on these issues. I hope we can clear up much of that misinformation, and I thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. So today we welcome the testimony of Elizabeth Rosenberg. Assistant Secretary Rosenberg is the Assistant Secretary for Terrorist Financing and Financial Crimes. Mr. Abraham Paley is the Deputy Special Envoy to Iran, and we want to thank you for taking the time to be here in person today, and without objection, your written statements will be made as part of our permanent record. So Assistant Secretary Rosenberg, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your oral remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Hazenga, Ranking Member Green, and distinguished members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on what the U.S. Department of the Treasury is doing to combat terrorist financing. October 7th was a day of horror. The brutality of the terrorist attacks carried out by Hamas against Israel, killing indiscriminately, sparing neither children nor the elderly, was an affront to our shared humanity and a somber reminder of the threat posed by terrorist organizations like Hamas. It is my responsibility as the Assistant Secretary for Terrorist Financing and Financial Crimes to identify and disrupt terrorist financing in the United States and abroad. Since the attacks, Treasury has redoubled its effort to identify and freeze the finances of Hamas and other Iran-backed terrorist groups. Hamas has traditionally been able to raise funds for its terrorist activities from an array of sources, including taxation, donations, a portfolio of investments across Africa and the Middle East, and direct support from Iran. The U.S. Treasury Department has historically used the full scope of its authorities to impede Hamas's funding. Sanctions designations of the group's leaders and investments span over 2 decades. Recognizing the dangerous role that Iran plays in destabilizing the region more broadly, Treasury has sanctioned nearly 1,000 individuals and entities connected to the Iranian regime and its proxies to date. Since the October attacks, Treasury has released 3 separate sanctions tranches focused on Hamas, designating over 50 additional individuals and entities linked to Hamas in Iran across multiple jurisdictions. And today, just this morning, Treasury has announced another tranche of sanctions on Hamas entities in connection with international partners. However, Hamas leaders live and move freely in Turkey, Qatar, and elsewhere, publicly solicit funds, and enjoy financial services. Therefore, in addition to sanctions designations, disrupting Hamas's international financial networks requires international action. In the wake of the Hamas attacks, Treasury reached out to counterparts across the Middle East and Europe to convey the administration's support for Israel and the intent to use all the tools at our disposal to expose and disrupt Hamas, including the Terrorist Financing Targeting Center, which we promptly convened among a number of Gulf partners in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, in October. Additionally, Treasury Undersecretary Nelson recently traveled to Turkey to discuss the urgent need for Turkish efforts to freeze Hamas funds. Deputy Secretary Adeyemo also spoke with his European counterparts in late October to press partners to investigate entities with possible ties to Hamas. Treasury has also had substantive technical outreach to our partners around the world, which has led to complementary sanctions actions by Australia, the European Union, Japan, the United Kingdom, and others to designate Hamas-related targets through their own domestic authorities. Treasury has also engaged the private sector, both in the United States and abroad, to refine the red flags and indicators of terrorist financing and underscore the imperative to report and freeze terrorist funds. Alongside these counter-illicit finance activities, Treasury has a significant role to play in addressing the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza to ensure that our financial measures do not negatively impact legitimate aid going to the people of Gaza. Treasury has had close engagement with representatives of non-governmental organizations, international organizations, and U.S. government implementers of humanitarian assistance on these matters. In sum, Treasury's response to Hamas and its funders over decades has been broad and aggressive. As this committee fully appreciates, Hamas's attacks and their relationship with Iran pose a threat to the safety and stability not only of Israel, but to the region more broadly and to American interests. All of us here share a common interest: preventing acts of terror. Secretary Yellen and Deputy Secretary Adeyemo have previously spoken about how to confront these challenges by maintaining U.S. leadership abroad, meeting all our financial commitments, and adapting our laws to meet the challenges posed by new and emerging financial technologies. I look forward to working with the members of this committee on these issues, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we will turn to Mr. Paley. You are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Huizenga, Ranking Member Green, members of the committee, thank you for inviting us here today. We welcome this opportunity to discuss Iran, one of the most persistent threats we face as a country. The Biden administration views Iran as an adversary and the leading state sponsor of terrorism. We are clear-eyed about Iran and will continue to take the actions necessary to counter the threats it poses, and our approach is framed within this context. Across the federal government, we are confronting Iran and pushing back against its destabilizing activities. We are coordinating closely with allies and partners to enhance our already strong military deterrent. We are implementing biting sanctions and economic pressure, and we are utilizing strategic messaging to make clear Iran's behavior will not be tolerated, will be punished, and that Tehran will continue to be treated as a pariah on the international stage, absent a shift in its policies. This resolve in countering Iran has been on full display since the horrific Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel on October 7th, the subsequent attacks by Iranian-backed proxies on U.S. personnel and facilities in the region, and the Iran-enabled Houthi attacks on Israel and on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. We view Iran as complicit in Hamas's barbaric terrorist attack and the attacks against us by its proxies, and we will continue to hold it accountable. The President and the Secretary of State have been unequivocal about our support for Israel and Israel's right to defend itself against terrorism. And the Biden administration has also been consistent in our efforts to counter Iran's longstanding support for Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and militia groups in Iraq and Syria. Our bolstered presence in the region has sent a clear message that this is not a time to take advantage of the situation. And President Biden has shown he is prepared to defend U.S. personnel and interests time and time again. While our priority right now remains supporting Israel, countering Iran's support for terrorism in the region, and addressing the humanitarian situation in Gaza, we also continue to counter the full range of the Iranian regime's activities that are antithetical to our interests and our values. We are confronting the Iranian regime's lethal plotting against current and former U.S. officials, as well as the transnational repression of dissidents, journalists, and human rights defenders, including on U.S. soil. We are using all of the tools at our disposal to expose and disrupt Iran's expanding military partnership with Russia, alongside our allies and partners. We are standing with the people of Iran in the face of continued oppression and violence. And on the nuclear front, President Biden is absolutely committed to never allowing Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon, and has been clear that we remain postured and prepared to use all appropriate measures to do so. Iran's unjust detention of our citizens for political leverage also represents a threat, and that is why we continue to stress to all Americans, do not go to Iran. President Biden and Secretary Blinken have been clear there is no higher priority than the safety and security of Americans, and the administration stands by our deal that brought 5 innocent Americans and 2 of their family members home. This deal was about reuniting these Americans with their loved ones. As part of this arrangement, we facilitated the transfer of $6 billion in restricted Iranian funds held in South Korea to restricted accounts in Qatar for humanitarian use only. Not a penny of this money has been spent, and these funds will not go anywhere anytime soon. This does not change anything about our approach to Iran. Iran remains an adversary, and we will continue to confront it as such. With respect to Qatar, its relationship with Hamas has been well known to multiple Israeli governments, including the current government, going back many years. It has been and remains extremely helpful in securing hostage releases. At the same time, we have discussed with Qatari leaders that there is no going back to the status quo of October 6th, and they have expressed their agreement with that. With respect to the waiver Secretary Blinken signed on November 14th, the 21st such waiver across multiple administrations for Iraq to pay for electricity imports and in support of Iraq's energy independence. Under these waivers, no money has been or will be permitted to enter Iran, and any notion to the contrary is false. These Iranian funds can only be used for the purchase of food, agricultural commodities, medicine, medical devices, and other non-sanctionable transactions. We do not believe that restricting the availability of humanitarian goods to the Iranian people would decrease Iran's support for terrorism. Iran has proven it prioritizes destabilizing activities and terrorism regardless of the country's macroeconomic conditions. And since we do not expect any change in Iran's behavior from these steps, our approach to Iran is similarly not going to change. And so I close by reaffirming the administration's commitment to addressing Iran's continued destabilizing behavior unilaterally and with our partners. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And before I get into my questions, I want to emphasize as well, the U.S. citizens that still go to Iran is stunning to me. Recently, I had the Swiss ambassador to Iran in my office. She and the Swiss act as our on-the-ground liaison since we do not have diplomatic relations. They know of tens of thousands of our citizens who are there, and they suspect that it may be more. So if anything, if we want to talk about bipartisan agreement, please do not go to Iran. And so we, the government, and we as citizens aren't ever put in that situation. So I wanted to emphasize that is a public service announcement from the Oversight Committee.